Hey there, everyone, and welcome to the Brand Bite podcast. I am super duper excited to be welcoming our guest today, Maggie Patterson. So, Maggie is the creator of BS Free Business and the author of Staying Solo. With 20 years of experience as a successful entrepreneur in client services, Maggie helps service businesses and business owners build what she proudly calls a boring business, which we're going to get into today, and I'm so excited about. Strategically small, sustainable, and designed to fit their lives without the constant hustle. She's a podcaster and a writer, and is a vocal advocate for humane business practices rooted in respect, empathy, and trust. She hosts two podcasts, The Staying Solo and Confessions of a Micro Agency Owner, and she co-hosts the consumer advocacy podcast, Duped, The Dark Side of Online Business. Now, I found Maggie on Threads, and she was saying something that I was like, oh my gosh, dude, we got to have a conversation. So before we dive into it, Maggie, please tell everyone how you got here, what your entrepreneurial journey has been like, and really what sets you on this path to write the book and start the business that you currently run.
Yeah, so my business has had over 20 years, many twists and turns, but like so many people, I had a very, traditional corporate job. I worked in an agency. I was tired. I had a baby. I was like, ugh, I want to go out on my own. And I am absolutely one of those people, like, was hardwired from day one to want to work for myself. And I knew early in my career that was something I was going to do. So it was like the least shocking thing to anybody who knew me. My husband was like, of course you're going to do that because you've always talked about it. And since then, as a marketer, as a communications professional, so many things have shifted over that time. I've seen a lot of things, but I've gone from doing PR to a lot more writing to business consulting, and I still do some corporate work. I do have a small micro agency with a small team over there, but I do mainly business consulting, really focusing in on those micro businesses, because one of the things that I discovered like 10-ish years ago when I was in the online space, a lot of the advice being given, I was like, this is not actually suited for the real world. Like, this is not how things actually work. And then a lot of people starting businesses were like, they're an amazing photographer, or designer, or branding person. They had all these skills, but they didn't have the business skills. And I was having a lot of conversations with like people in my communities and like just business friends. They're like, I don't understand how you're doing X, or how are you making Y? And I was like, oh, so I just kind of started talking to people about that. And then everyone's like, can you just like do this? I was like, yeah, I can do this. This is fun for me, because I had this really unique entrepreneurial experience early on when I was in an agency. It was a very entrepreneurial agency. So they gave me an amazing, I basically had a business crash course. So I had learned so many things before I'd even started my business. And I just took it for granted that everyone knew those things. So here we are today with a book, many podcasts, and for an introverted person, I talk a lot on the internet.
I love it. Well, I want you to kind of elaborate on this micro agency and micro business, because I feel like it really is at the core of a lot of what you teach. And I think it's something that not many people have kind of heard before, right? Like, we hear the scale, the big agency, the big business, but what is a micro business?
So by definition, micro business is a business with 9 employees or less. So we use the term small business, right? But the problem with the term small business is small can mean up to like 50 or even 200 employees, depending on the definition, where the majority of businesses, particularly in the US and Canada, that's where I am. So, it's also are small, like one person businesses. That's 80% of businesses. And think of like your hairdresser, plumber, like a lot of these people are independent professionals, but we don't think about photographers or designers or lawyers. They're independent in the same way. We often think of like, ooh, that card store, the brick and mortar, gift shop in my community as those businesses. And what we really have is businesses that are service-based and businesses that are doing these services, literally as a team of one. And there is not nearly enough conversation about the fact that that is a very legitimate business model, and you don't have to scale, because scale is what we see modeled on the internet, 10x. You should be making 7 figures. Well, guess what? Most people never make that kind of money, not to be a buzzkill, but that's reality. And Most people are never going to have a giant team because that is one of the reasons they left their previous role or they started their business, because they need to be very capacity conscious. They have no interest in leadership. We can run our businesses in a way that work for our lives and are truly boring and not causing drama, and like let us shut the laptop at the end of the day, feel satisfied, and then go do whatever we want to do.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up some of these stats. So, everyone, I've been reading Maggie's book, Staying Solo, and the stats are astounding. Like how many businesses are actually considered micro or small business, and the number of like women to own businesses that there are, and also the amount of money that they tend to make. Like, guys, if check out this book, I'm serious. It is very, very cool to see this happening. And I feel like it sheds some light, and you touched on this a little bit too, on this notion that the information that we are being fed online about what running a business looks like, what it should look like,
Yes.
isn't sustainable or realistic or even the dream of many entrepreneurs. And so, Maggie, I'd love for you to kind of talk about how you stumbled upon this yourself. Like what was your kind of kick in the rear of like, let's pause, like let's do this differently. Why is this all I'm seeing out here?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many facets to that. But I think the number one thing is, kind of 2013, 2014, 2015, I was in this online business world, and I had the unique experience of working behind the scenes in some of these big name celebrity entrepreneur businesses. That was an education, and I really started to see how things were being done, and I was like, oh, this is all bullshit designed to sell us something. I really saw it happening. And then, as I started working with other, solo and micro business owners, I was like, everyone believes this? Oh, no, 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 no. This isn't real. This isn't actually happening. And I think the thing for me that I really struggle with for a long time is I think about even in my own community. Like, I live in a mid-sized city. I didn't feel like I fit anywhere. Like, I would go to a networking event and I'd be like, these are not my people. Online is where I have found my people, but we still didn't have a name. It's like online service provider. What? No, that's clunky. So I started to really do a lot of research because I'm incredibly curious, incredibly nosy, to be real. And I really discovered, I was like, oh, there's something that's not a small business, because people are like, oh, you own a restaurant? I'm like, no, no, no. I work at home in my pajamas. I am all the stereotypes. And micro businesses are really and truly something that is very, very pervasive and totally gets ignored. I did this presentation yesterday for a group of youths who are interested in entrepreneurship. And the first thing I did is on my slides, I put up a picture of sharks on Shark Tank. And I was like, this is what we think of when we think of entrepreneurship, but it's actually me. Like, more people starting businesses today look like you and I. And that is what people need to be thinking about if they want to start their own business.
Well, I love that you are sharing that, because I feel like it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast in the first place, right? Is like all I saw online were the sharks or the people flashing their very fancy 7-figure businesses. Mm-hmm. And I was like, part of me was like, there's no fucking way I'm the only one out here, really going through it. Like, what is this?
That is the number one thing people say to me when they find, they basically find me magically on a podcast or through the magic of the internet. And they're like, God, thank you for saying the thing. And I'm like, welcome, come here. I've been saying this for a long time, and I'm glad. Welcome to our club of normal, boring business owners who are driving used Hyundai Elantras and not Lamborghinis.
Right. Well, I love that you bring up the boring business. It's something you talk about in your book too. Tell people what you mean by boring business. Because like you said, all we see right now online a lot of the time is the big it's the flashy business. I'm going to call it the kind of, and as you were talking about this, I was like, oh my God, this sounds like Wizard of Oz, where you've got the man behind the curtain, right? But what is a boring business?
Oh, and I always like to make the distinction of boring does not mean you're bored. So that's one of the pieces. People are like, I don't want to be bored. And I'm like, oh, do you think I'm bored? I'm not bored in the least. Boring means it's predictable. It's peaceful, it's profitable. You're creating a business that's not causing constant drama, that you're not having the Sunday scaries, that you're not freaking out every time your Slack pings, that you are setting yourself up so that you can really ensure the business is working for your life, for the season you're in, for the capacity you have, for how you need to work. I work with a lot of people who are neurodivergent. I work with a lot of people with disabilities. Giving duties. They have to ensure that the business is there to serve them in their actual life. And so many things we are taught to do in our business, they don't work for people who actually have real lives. So when I talk about a boring business, I'm like, let's just let our businesses be simple. Let's not like fall into this trap of constantly hustling and chasing these bigger and bigger numbers and not actually bringing it home any more money. And that's, we talk about that in the book too. But also just really considering like, what do I really want from the business? And what does success look for me? And it doesn't have to look like these very flashy online businesses where like, I scaled to 1 billion figures and I have this team of 20. Like that sounds exhausting to me. I just want to do work that I really enjoy with people that I think are great. And we have great, respectful relationships and everyone is happy. And the other thing is too, here in 2025, there is enough external drama in the larger hellscape of our world. Nobody needs to be running a business that's adding to the stress of just being a human on this planet and the existential dread we already have.
You could not have said a more real statement than what you just did, Maggie. And I feel like this is something that I've been talking to, right? Like a lot of my entrepreneur friends where it's like even showing up to do the work for clients, right? Like that's one part of it. But even just to like do the work that has to happen within the business, with everything else happening right now, the amount of why am I even doing this that is hitting because there's so much else going on is huge. So I really appreciate that you pointed out that elephant in the room.
The thing is, like business owners, even if you're well resourced, even if you're incredibly privileged, like this is a hard time to run a business. We've got so many things happening all at once and you start to question like, why am I doing this? And I think going back to, I am doing this because I need to survive whatever is happening. And for that, I need to have a business that's steady and actually paying me so that I can do the things I need to do, whether that be like, I'm going to volunteer in my community. I'm going to do mutual aid. Like, what are the things I need to be able to do to not just, be okay, but like to ensure that I'm making those changes I want to make. And I'm not saying like be the change you want to see in the world level. Like I'm going to give $1 million to fund wells. No, like maybe you're going to give $100 to someone in your community who's short on food this month.
Right. Well, even thinking about like you talked about why you started a business in the first place, what success looks like to you. Like I feel like those are those things. Like these here, like how can I give back to my community? What people can I impact? And like I said, not necessarily the big, again, flashy, what's the word I want to use? I don't necessarily want to say audacious, right? But like just the really big, the cool goal, right? That is this way down the line thing. Like how can you make a difference now? And you have to have, like you said, this boring, simplified, steady, sustainable business to give you the runway and the space to do that, to show up how you want to. So I'd love to hear... Right. And I think the audience would really like to hear this too, is how did you start to develop this kind of business for yourself? Like I know for me personally, I'll go through phases, right? Where I'm like, okay, like this feels more sustainable. I'm feeling more aligned, but we are human beings. We are easily influenced. That is what marketing is for. Maggie, you and I, we have been in the marketing world. We know how the sausage is made.
Yes.
Like it is designed to make you feel cruddy, so you buy something. So how then do you continue to navigate this space, staying aligned to what you believe, right? That you can run a sustainable, boring micro business and be successful with all of the chatter around you?
This is really, really nuanced. And I always say, like, listen, I have a podcast where we literally talk about deceptive marketing practices, where I talk about all this stuff. And sometimes I know exactly, I could tell you the psychological theory being applied, and still I find it enticing. So I think part of this is recognizing for each of us, what is the influence that is having on us? Like, how are you internalizing that? Some people can just scroll by it. Some people are going to know, like, be like, oh, I'm going to get sucked into it. So recognizing that you are vulnerable is the number one defense against this, because they always talk about, like, in cult documentaries, like, the most vulnerable people are the people who think they would never join a cult. It's the same thinking, because a lot of those tactics are the same, designed to break down your critical thinking, to sell you a dream, to make you feel bad about yourself, and for you to, trying to solve problems. And something I say to my clients a lot is, like, yeah, that sounds enticing, but, like, what's the actual problem you were trying to solve in your business right now? Because I can guarantee the proven Instagram caption system is not it. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Like,
yes. And I have fallen victim. Oh Lord, like, I am a marketer's wet dream. I'm just like, oh my God, I love this idea. How fun. Absolutely. A shiny object here. Sign me up. And I'm like, damn, the number of, like, even courses, right, that I have bought for my business that I never used because the marketing sucked me in and got me. So I really appreciate you bringing up this point of, like, know that you are susceptible. Know even your warning signs, right? And, like, I'd imagine too, just pause. A big part is immediacy. They want you to buy now. Like, take
and
pause.
there is nothing that can't wait. And, like, I always joke, like, there is nothing that, the cart's closing in 3 minutes. It'll be okay if you don't buy it. And one of the things I did to kind of stop myself from that buying cycle is I have a budget for education. I have a budget for coaching and consulting, and I plan that out for the year. Again, not super exciting, but it saves me from myself from the impulse purchase. So, like, I was looking at working with a consultant. I went back to my budget. I thought about it for a bit. I had a conversation with her. Like, moved very slowly and methodically versus chasing that dopamine hit. Like, if you're someone who's, like, buying online courses for a dopamine hit, like, buy a plant instead and care for that.
Yes.
Get yourself a little treat, okay? Like, you don't need a $4.97 course. I guarantee it.
Another one.
Another one that you're never going to open, and it's probably going to make you feel bad about yourself and then make you feel resentful. The other thing is too, Hunter, just, like, really in social media, like, we are all so nosy, and I am, like, literally one of the nosiest humans on the planet, but at the same time, just, like, not use that block, mute. You do not need to follow all these people. Like, if someone is giving you that emotional reaction, or you always feel like, I'm not good enough, I need to buy something, just, like, untether yourself. Subscribe from newsletters. Like, really curate what you are letting into your head, because it is no different than reading books that stress you out. Like, I don't read gory murders because it gives me anxiety.
Right. Well, it's so smart to start to filter it out. And I've said this, I've wanted to either write this short story or, like, see this movie made of, like, what it would be like if we had ad blockers for, like, glasses. Right? Like, if you walk around, because if you sit and think about how much you're being marketed to and advertised to and how much you're being sold to constantly, like, it is very exhausting. And so in the online space where, again, we're kind of trained to want to follow along and see everything, like you said, we're nosy. We all are. Just admit it, folks. Like, to curate that and be really intentional with the people that you are witnessing and supporting, but also, like, taking advice from as well. As we think back to this, like, scale mantra, the 6-figure, the 7-figure, the big that we see online, like, that can really take a toll on you. It can make you feel like you're not enough, you're not doing enough, which makes me want to circle back to your statement about what does success look like for you. And I'd love if you could dive into this a little bit more and help people start to really pinpoint that and weed through their own external voices, I guess, that are like, oh, you need this, like, six figures is it. That's what I've been seeing everywhere. And then you've got the seven figures. And also, I feel like people don't realize like how big of a jump it is from six figures to seven figures, then eight figures as well. We're dealing with that too.
Gosh, the first time I saw eight figures, I just rolled my eyes and shut down the internet for the whole day. I was like, I'm out. Like, do people understand that's $10 million in a year and the capital that's involved? Please stop it. And I think, it's interesting, like, it used to be six figures and then it was seven figures and now it's eight figures or like whatever. And it's like, people don't even know what these numbers are. And the stats, I touch on this in the book, like, you literally, the majority of people never cross the $100,000 a year mark. It's not that it is not possible. It is very possible, but a lot of people never get there for a lot of different reasons. Yet that is seen as some arbitrary standard. And I like when I talk with my clients, when I'm chatting with people, I'm always like, I don't care what you think the goal should be. Like, let's figure out the actual goal. And so much of it is like, how do you go inward? Like, how do you really define what your values are? And I don't mean like kindness. I mean like talk about trust and humanity and like expertise. Like those are values to me in my business that really matter. So how am I bringing those forth in everything I do? And not just, on an about page. Like how is that showing up in how we communicate with clients? How is that showing up in marketing? How is that in sales? How is it showing up in every touch point in the business? And that's really dictating the decisions I make. So like when I say humane and trust, that means I can't turn around and use an income claim. So that's keeping me from falling prey to these things because my integrity is super, super important to me. The other thing is, this is something that my friend Barry Bear, and I talk about them in the book, really, they're an anti-capitalist business coach. And something they talked about before anyone else really was talking about is the idea of enough. And, that's not a new concept, but they did such a good job of like, I don't know, that really stuck in my head and really getting to like, what does enough look like for me? And all the factors that go into enough are very different for each person. Are you a single person living in a high cost of living area who has to pay for elder care for your elderly grandmother? Like your financial needs are very different than someone who lives in a low cost of living, has a partner, maybe has money saved. So understanding for you on a personal level, like what do I need this business to do for me financially? And then starting to back into that. And I talk a lot about like reverse calculating your salary, understanding like, hey, if I want to bring home $5,000 a month, how much do I actually need to make in the business based on my expenses and everything? And I will tell you something, the second people start to do that reverse calculation, they realize all the places they're spending money on things they don't need that could be in their pocket.
This reverse engineering, I think, is so smart because if you think about the big, the six figure, the seven figure, it's all arbitrary, right? Like there's nothing in my life that I have pinned that amount to. And I love that you're like the salary piece, right? Because most of us aren't paying ourselves appropriately. And while the business may be bringing in X amount of money, just as you talked about, there are a ton of expenses. In your book, you even mentioned that most entrepreneurs actually wind up making less money over their lifetime than people who worked a regular job. And I was like, oh my God.
That piece of research lives rent free in my head. And what's really interesting is once I started digging into that, I started thinking about my own entrepreneurial journey. And I started looking at and talking to friends I just started my career with. And I'm like, I have made excellent money as a business owner and I would never trade it. But let's be real, I would have made way more in corporate. Way more. I would be miserable and probably been like on like 14 sabbaticals from burnout because I'm extra and I'm prone, like I'm a little worker bee. Like I'd just be like, going after it. But I think recognizing that is like, okay, so what do I actually need from the business? And I think one thing that's been really interesting for me, really digging into the salary piece is my business has been bigger and my business has been smaller. And when my business was bigger, I wasn't paying myself any more than I am now. I'm actually paying myself more now than I was when my business is a little bigger. So, this assumption that I'm going to have a 7-figure business, I'm all of a sudden going to be, I'm going to be independently wealthy. A lot of those people are paying themselves less than solopreneurs I know who are, doing $80,000 a year.
Well, I think it's so important to bring up then the like the reminder of why you started the business in the first place, right? Because if we look at the stats of, okay, chances are I would have made hella bank in corporate, but I knew that that was a soul sucking job I didn't want. And so leveraging things, you talk about this in your book as well, the kind of like creating space for yourself and making the business something that works for the reason you started it in the first place. So for example, right? Like if you're a mom and you need to be home with your kids. Okay, so you started it for some of the freedom, the time freedom. And so like, I'd love for you to dive into more of this. And if you've got examples from clients or different ways that they have built their businesses to suit their actual needs. And I love that you brought up the value-driven decisions. Like that is so huge in keeping yourself on your path. And it's hard, right? In entrepreneurship, because in corporate, you've got a ladder. You're like, okay, cool. The next rung, right? The next promotion. And you don't have that in entrepreneurship. So how do you help people stay on, first off, discover their vision, right? And then stay on it.
No, I think that what's interesting about the vision is often the vision you start the business with will change and evolve over time. Like I know for me, I started the business because I was like, I need to stay home with this child, this baby I just had. And I mean, a very common story for a lot of people and totally legitimate. My reasons change over time, but there's always been a reason where I needed or wanted that flexibility. And sometimes it's been caregiving, like I've been through, navigated the elder part of it. Sometimes it was my child. Sometimes it was caring for myself. Like I have anxiety and depression. I have ADHD. Like I've had to build the business to work for me. I've had different health things go on. So recognizing for you in whatever season you're in, what are the needs I need to, what does the business need to be supporting? And then I also think thinking about, like I have an entire chapter on space. So one of the things I talk about in there is the different types of capacity. When we think about capacity planning, we think about our time. We go, I got 10 hours. I can do 10 hours of client work. We don't think about the energetic capacity, the sensory capacity, the emotional capacity. Like if you're someone who's doing coaching, you're a therapist, there's a heavy emotional load to that. Can't spend every day of your working hours being like, I'm going to like take on all this stuff. There's other things you're going to have to do. You need time to run the business. So, making sure that yes, you're true to the vision of why you started the business, but also you're respecting the capacity and your needs at any given season you're in.
Well, I think the capacity thing is really, really big. And it's something that I feel like is starting to be talked about a little bit more, especially like energetic capacity. And it's something that I've started to incorporate in my own business where I'm like, okay, and I was scared. You guys, I was so scared to send that email at the start of the year where I was like, I'm no longer doing client work on Mondays. You guys get me Tuesday through Friday, but Mondays are mine and I get to do whatever the hell I want with my Monday. Some days just working on the business. Other days, I spent a whole day reading a book. I was like, this is what I need today.
Yes.
Right? Like, this is what I need. But that was scary. That was so scary because you've got these fears, right? Of like, number one, if you've got clients, okay, are the clients going to leave me? Are they going to get mad that I am not available? And you bring up in the book, which I think is so important, that if you were in a regular job and you took time off, the clients would understand. Like people take time off in regular jobs.
They take time off. They have doctor's appointments.
Right.
My old job, we used to be able to go on a 6-week sabbatical every few years. So like when you think about that, like we create these work conditions for ourselves that are so much worse in a lot of situations than what we would have had in corporate. And like, it's funny when you were talking about the whole, not working on Mondays. A few years ago, we moved to a 4-day work week and I sent that email. It was the most cavalier email I've ever sent because I was just emotionally done that week. And I sent the email and I was like, starting January, whatever, we are no longer operating on Fridays. Do you want to know what everyone responded? Good, that's great. I love that for you. No, yes. Your clients, if you have good clients, the kind of clients you really want to work with that have a mutual respect for you, they're going to be cheering you on. They're not going to be like, Hunter, I can't believe you're off on Mondays. they're going to be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I wish I could be off on Mondays.
Exactly. Exactly. And I feel like this is one of those things where you really are, you have to lead. And you're not necessarily leading a team, right? But you're leading yourself and your future self as well by setting these boundaries now as your present self. And I think that is one of the most empowering things that you can do as a business owner. And it is really it is scary because you have these notions. And I know for me, like I very much have some people pleaser tendencies. I don't want to upset anyone. And I've had to really step into this fact like, okay, Hunter, but are you upsetting you? Because if you're upsetting you,
Yes.
maybe we need to have a conversation about this, me and my mirror.
If you're consistently upsetting yourself and then you become resentful and then you want to totally burn down your business and you like hate all your clients for no other reason than like you had to work on Mondays, like that's not serving anyone. And I think we think of boundaries as being like mean or like like the client's going to be upset. Cannot think of a time with a client that I actually thought was a great client where the boundary has been an issue. Like we as humans have boundaries in everything and if you don't, everyone, please get some. I think it's chapter 11. I talk about business boundaries, but we all have these kind of rules of how we engage. So why wouldn't we have those with our clients? And why wouldn't we have those with ourselves around our work?
Exactly, exactly. And again, we've got them in most other instances in our lives. Like the business is no different. You'd have them at your normal 9 to 5. You'd be like, sorry guys, I clocked out, deuces. Like, why are you not doing that?
The dentist is like, please show up 10 minutes early for your appointment. If you're 5 minutes late, like we're not seeing you. Like that is a boundary. So when you start to really think about boundaries and start to see them in other places, that kind of gives you the permission slip to be like, why wouldn't I do that?
Yes, I love that. Everyone look for the boundaries where they're at so you can start implementing those as well. I've got another question for you, and we've touched on it a little bit, but I think again I want to harp on it personally. But the image versus the reality, because again, I think this is so important, and I feel like we're starting to get some pushback too, and I think it's from people who aren't willing, I think, or maybe even are afraid, right, to give up the hustle culture. And I think there's some pushback of, well, like, I've still got to make money, and how am I supposed to make money if I'm, doing whatever? And what we're not saying don't work. Like, that's not what is being said here. What we're saying is build your work in a way that suits you and is for you. And so I'd love for you to touch on this a little bit more. Again, the image versus the reality, the way that you're navigating the pushback too, because I am sure you are experiencing it, kind of spearheading this movement.
Listen, I'm not for everyone. And I will say that, like, I'm not here to convince anyone the hustle culture is, evil or anything. Like, you do you. But when you're ready to accept that, like, maybe this isn't working for you and this is a construct of a very broken economic system, then we can have that conversation. But I think when you think about hustle, there's a difference between hustle culture, which is teaching us to, grind our way to success and that we have to put in the hours and everything else. And seasons of hustle where you might be working a little more by choice and by design. Like yesterday, I worked a very long day. I was off on Monday, I'll be off on Friday. It was by design. And someone would be like, oh, you're hustling. You worked 11 hours. Well, guess what? I was hustling, but I also, there was a trade-off there. So, or recognizing hey, I'm in the middle of, I'm launching my new website. I am going to be working a few extra hours versus being the default is I'm always working the extra. I'm always doing the extra things. And also recognizing that a lot of times hours is not a really good measure of how we're doing in the business, because the more you work, the less effective you are. A lot of the things you're doing, you probably don't even need to be doing. There's so much overcomplication in the entrepreneurship realm because those products are designed to make us feel bad about ourselves, so we buy things. So they're literally invented problems that we don't have. Like, oh, maybe you need a system for you've never even thought of that, and all of a sudden you're convinced that's the solution. And that's the thing you have to watch for, is like, am I making this needlessly complicated? Because the reality is, a service business in particular should be very, very, very simple.
Yes, so good. Maggie, I have loved this conversation. I feel like we could talk all day. I know that we are approaching our time, so I want to ask you my favorite question to ask everyone, and I suspect I know what your answer might be, but we'll see. So if there was one thing that you could change in the entrepreneurial space, what would you like to see done differently?
No more aspirational marketing. No more income claims. No more look at me on my yacht. No more look at me with my amazing life. Like, aspirational marketing is not selling you the thing it's selling you. It's selling you the dream, because we think if I buy the course, I am now going to be free or I'm going to be rich. And like, that's a result for such a tiny, like less than 1% of the people that are buying it. But they know that that is a deep emotional appeal that's appealing to a very primal part of you that's like, I want to be comfortable. I want to be safe. I want to be secure. And like, we're motivated by those things. And there's this really interesting study I always think about, because people love to argue with me on the internet about income claims. They're like, but I'm just showing potential. I'm like, no. When people are in a state of financial scarcity, they are more susceptible to something like an income claim. They're more susceptible to aspirational marketing. So that right there tells you that we have our critical thinking is diminished, that we're more susceptible to that. And that's why they do it. They want us to follow that through, and they want us to buy the thing. And sometimes the thing is a $37 product, but sometimes it's a $30,000 mastermind that people can't afford, and they're, liquidating their 401k or their savings. And that to me is very, very troubling.
And predatory. Like, I feel like there's a lot of like predatory acts happening in the online space, and it has been happening for a while. And I think there was this big boom over the pandemic, right, of a lot of people who left their jobs and started things up. And you saw a boom in like the courses and the masterminds and things. And I think you saw a lot of people getting taken advantage of. I'm very interested to see the direction that things go, because I think a lot of people have started to be like, wait a second, I'm not so sure about this anymore.
There's actually there was an article I've been talking about this stuff for years. I mean, I was just like, this is wrong. You'll all catch up. But we're starting to see mainstream media coverage. Like, there was an article this week in the LA Times about manifestation coaches and like the financial abuse that has happened there. So, this stuff is very real, and it's not just some random gal from Canada talking about this. Like, it is very real. And like, when the mainstream media is starting to cover it, that's a sign that we all should be watching out.
Oh, so good. So good, Maggie. Well, please tell people how they can get in contact with you if they want to continue this conversation. I know I want to continue it. So how can we get in touch?
So the best place to find me is my book is Staying Solo. It's all the places books are sold. If you've liked this conversation, I absolutely recommend two things. I have a companion private podcast that goes with the book, and you can just go sign up for that. It's 8 like behind the scenes interviews for all the nosy people. That is at bsfreebusiness.com/hunter. We tried to make it really memorable. And then of course my podcast Staying Solo is a really great place to start, and my website bsfreebusiness.com.
I love it. Well, everyone, that information is going to be in the show notes. Maggie, again, thank you so much for coming on the show today, talking to us, breaking down the BS that is the online space. I could not have asked for a better conversation.